This was due to lack of funding. Lu Ming, a professor at Shanghai Jiatong University's Antai School of Economics and Management, said that migrants were left with few options in the wake of a slowing property market. 4 consecutive months of decline in home prices has left China's housing market close to wiping out its gains over the last year, a trend that could further hurt consumer confidence. The property market accounts for roughly 15% of China's economy. And that is the size of it from this end. Good morning, Nigeria will continue in a moment. My name is Leah Katun Babatunde.
Okay, thank you very much, dear Leah, for the business news. We're now having a review of the papers after this timeout. As usual, in the studios with us this morning is Mr. Bayo Atuibi, former Executive Secretary of the Nigerian Press Council. Bayo, welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you, Kinsley. Good morning and good morning, Nigeria.
Okay, a story that is common to most of the front pages of the papers that we have this morning has to do with the row in the House of Reps yesterday over the $9.3 million that was seized by the South African authorities some days ago. But we begin our paper this morning, begin our review this morning with This Day. And the lead story on the front page of This Day says, $9.3 million arms deal. That's the kicker. APC House members stage walkout, accuse FG, that's federal government, of money laundering. And there are 2 riders to that. Alleged $50,000 bribe per legislator to quash debate. And Senate confirms money belongs to government. Also on the front page is 50 fleeing Boko Haram members arrested as Defense Headquarters refutes rescue of Chibok girls. That's just beside the photograph on the front page of This Day there. And then at the top of the page, on top of the front page, above the name flag, is U.S. and Arab allies launch first strike on IS in Syria. IS stands for Islamic State in Syria. It occupies parts of Syria and Iraq. Details of that story to be found on page 6. And also on the front page, Atiku to declare for presidency today, and Southwest APC endorses bid. I go very quickly to the inside pages now. Page 8 of This Day newspaper. Page 8 of This Day newspaper. Presidency, that's the kicker. Only Jonathan can decide his running mate. Only Jonathan can decide his running mate. Of course, page 8 of This Day newspaper, that story is attributed to the special advisor to the President on Political Affairs, Professor Ahmed Al-Khali. And also on page 8, that's a story, I'm sure, Bayo, please take note of this story. Suntai, that's the kicker. Suntai is the indisposed governor of Taraba State. Court declines to grant injunction restraining medical panel. And also, a rider to that, orders parties to maintain status quo. And on page 9 of This Day as well, synagogue tragedy, that's the kicker. Page 9, synagogue tragedy. TB Joshua not welcome in South Africa, ANC warns. And there are 3 riders to that story. 3 South Africans permanently disabled and Botswana citizens repatriated after Nigeria building collapse. And Lagos suspends action on collapsed building. Also on that page, there's a story we'd like you to listen to, take note of. Rivers government kicks as police lead Okocha into court premises. That has to do with the issue of an acting chief judge for Rivers State. And very quickly, I'll take the Nigerian pilot. The front page of the Nigerian pilot, of course, has to do with the Rivers CJ crisis. That's the lead story. Rivers CJ crisis. CJ stands for Chief Judge. That's the kicker. Police open court for Justice Okocha and 2 riders there. Acting CJ holds crucial meeting with judges and security agents disperse protesters. Details will be found on page 4. And promoted also on the front page is reps reject debate on $9.3 million cash for arms saga. Find out the details on page 4. And also just below the nameplate of the Nigerian pilot, troops arrest 50 more insurgents in Borno, details on page 6, and mutiny, death sentence in army's interest. Find out the details on page 9. And also on the front page of the Nigerian pilot, there are some promotional stories there. I will just take them very quickly. These are like their news notes. Military has capacity to end insurgency. That's according to article. Details on page 6. Also to be found on page 6, Senate passes corporate manslaughter bill. And medical panel can't probe Governor Suntai court rules. That's, of course, in contradistinction to the story I read earlier from, the headline I read earlier from this day. And, of course, all promoted on the front page there is over 500,000 jobs created in 6 months. That's according to the National Bureau of Statistics. And Kaduna to restrict development to tax-paying communities. Details will be found on page 9. Claire?
Oh, yeah, thank you, Kingsley. And like you said earlier on, all the papers lead with the same story, except for one or two. And that story is on the developments, of course, that happened yesterday at the House of Representatives. But I begin with Daily Trust. Daily Trust is leading with that story. And it says, court declined, reps storm out over $9.3 million cash. Trading with Ihedioha blocks debate. It says it's a security issue. Alleged $50,000 bribe to some members creates rift. And just above that story, you have another one. Court declines to stop panel on Suntai. And that's the way Daily Trust captions that story. Just coming down, you have a picture story there for a defaced pro-Jonathan billboard at Wuse 2 in Abuja yesterday. Police arrest 150 in Kano operation. It's trending at the bottom there. And Nigeria-EU trade reached 8.5 trillion naira in 2013. I'll go to the inside pages now, just to go to page 4. And page 4 has a full caption of some of the stories. Court declines to stop medical panel on Suntai. Kingsley read out some other captions from other papers. And I think, Kingsley, you did say there are conflicting captions coming in.
Yes, there are conflicting captions. I read one of the last ones. Nigerian pilot had a different slant to that story. And as we find out from other papers as well, there are conflicting accounts as to what the ruling of the court was. That's correct, yes.
All right. Still on the inside page of the Daily Trust, page 4, 50 fleeing Boko Haram members nabbed in Biu. It's just coming down on page 4. Below the story on the court declines to stop medical panel on Suntai. And don't vote for treasury looters, that's coming from Buhari. And on page 5, still of the same paper, Ebola, Senate passes bill on quarantine emergency procedure. It's on page 6. An outrage in reps over $9.3 million arms cash. Ebola could strike 20,000 in 6 weeks, rumble on 4 years, and that's coming from a study, and it's on page 6 of the Daily Trust. And quickly now to leadership's front page. Military retracts claim of Chibok girls' release. It's the lead story on the front page. Gunmen killed 12 in Nasarawa. It writes there. Military retracts claim of Chibok girls' release. It's the lead story of the leadership. And just below the masthead, $9.3 million reps in rowdy session as APC members walk out. And of course, just trending below that, federal government clarifies waiver on auto policy. Only 3% of Nigeria's land mass has been duly registered. Federal government, it's trending at the bottom of the front page. And details can be found on page 14. Quickly, The Guardian. The Guardian leads with a story again on the row in House of Reps over $9.3 million seized in South Africa. Senate panel begins investigation. OK's court marshalling of 12 soldiers. That's the writer there. Atiku joins presidential race today. It's also on the front page of The Guardian. And one of the missiles launched against ISIS fighters yesterday, it's also a lead story, picture story on the front page of The Guardian. U.S. Arab allies launch first strikes on fighters in Syria. Ban welcomes intervention in conflict. Other stories trending at the bottom of the paper. Okay, let's join Mr.
I think we have
Yes.
some discussion on the headlines that we've read.
The whole of the nation yesterday was gripped with joy in the afternoon when it appeared apparently that the Chibok girls had been released. But it was a misinterpretation. 30 of the girls that had escaped from the insurgents were actually conveyed in buses. They are to be relocated in other schools to continue their education, particularly in Kaduna State by the Borno State government. And therefore, when they saw girls in 2 buses drive into Malari barracks, people jumped with euphoria thinking that the Chibok girls have been released. But however, that may be a premonition that in no distant future, all of us hoping the girls will come home to their parents and to all of us. And we need to support our soldiers, to encourage them to put their noses to the grinding stone and secure the release of our girls alive and return them to their parents and to the nation.
So, Mr. Toyebi,
yes.
Still on this issue, because yesterday I actually watched a reporter, a Nigerian journalist, apparently on the BBC, given details of what he, said was how the girls were released and what the reaction of the DHQ and all that. And I found that to be, if this is the case, where did he get, what's the source of his story?
I think there is a mix-up in all this. There are some subtle information pointing towards a negotiation between getting some insurgents released as a way to swap for the girls, and that still had not come true. Maybe this is the mix-up they are having, but what happened was that the Borno State government had promised that the girls' education would not be interrupted. Therefore, those who have been escaped from the insurgents are being relocated to other schools for them to continue their educational career. The other thing close to that is the issue about Shekau. We recall that they said Shekau has been killed, but information coming is that there is an Ahmed Selkida, who is a journalist who had to in fact relocate to somewhere in the Middle East because he felt threatened. He is a link man to these people, and he has categorically said that the gentleman that was killed in Kunduga area is by name Isa Damaska, Bashir Muhammad, and there's another Isa Damaska. The two of them are the double who always try to mimic Shekau, and that the original Abubakar Shekau was killed since June 19th, 2013. In fact, the Australian supposed negotiator has also confirmed that the original Shekau had been killed since 2013. But there are 2 others who have been mimicking the Shekau. Suntai's story is causing...
Sorry.
Yes.
Where does that leave us now? If Shekau had the body double, as it were, one of them has been taken out now, is that the case? So we have, let's say Shekau the second is gone, and Shekau the third is on the run or something?
No, all that it means is that, with the insurgency, they always have their furrows. You never can tell. They always want to spring that element of surprise. You recall that, or even when with the U.S., Osama bin Laden was reported to have been killed several times, and video will still surface before he was eventually killed somewhere in Pakistan. So there's always that strategy. Once you eliminate one, they'll bring somebody to mimic that same voice. The whole idea is to keep the impression that they are not being decimated. But the truth of the matter is that the war is getting closer to them.
That's correct, but which also imposes some duty on the media not to create the myth of invincibility of any purported Shekau. If Shekau has been killed, he's been killed. And not to say, oh, this is Abubakar Shekau, and sometimes they use that to mock the Nigerian armed forces, who members of the forces are, of course, putting their lives on the line to ensure that insurgency is curtailed and that the insurgents themselves are, in fact, routed. So if Shekau has been killed, he has been killed. In fact, of course, on this program, we are vast to the publication of gory photographs.
Yes.
But the photographs I saw online of the cadaver, the dead body of Shekau, obviously looks like the gentleman who, or the person who had always come on air in their videos, to threaten and to mock and so on and so forth. I think that just the resemblance is so striking that there probably will be no doubt. I wonder if anybody is going to conduct any DNA test to ascertain whether or not he's there. But the truth apparently would be that he's gone, and then the media should now refrain from say that, oh, Shekau is alive, oh, Shekau has re-emerged. Otherwise, we'll continue to extend the invisibility.
Isn't the conduct of a DNA very relevant in this case? If all the confusion that is, coming out of this is...
Well, when you're having a DNA, there has to be a baseline. First of all, they would have had you have to have, as it were, the gene structure of the person against whom you are going to match it. So do we have any gene structure of Shekau? I mean, these are gentlemen. I keep using the word gentlemen. These are terrorists who have been in the arid zones, and they've been, I doubt if they've made themselves available to medical facilities or medical officers where either their swab, was taken, and then you say, look, you are going to match it, or their tooth, you say, okay, you're going to match it against some data that you previously had. I doubt if there was any such thing.
I think we can't be sure.
I think in this context, the only thing to do is to put the public on notice that they should not be surprised if somebody comes up tomorrow and claims to be Shekau, and that is their manner of conducting their operations, and therefore they should be able to see through that rules. Let's quickly go to the issue of the Sontai. The papers are reporting two conflicting perspectives, and I think they are only taking different perspectives or reporting the same thing. The crux of the matter is that the court said it has no jurisdiction to stop the medical panel. However, because a superior court is already considering the issue which has been brought before it, it cannot entertain the subject matter. And therefore, the fact of the situation is that the court has declined that it cannot entertain the suit, pending what the Supreme Court will decide about the earlier case that has been filed by Sontai. However, there were also a report, I think in one of the papers, also alleging that there are moves to impeach both Sontai and the acting governor. One of the press secretaries, I think, to the speaker, has denied that there's nothing like that. But again, that is the political development coming up in Taraba State there. The other issue of concern is what appears to be the desecration of the Temple of Justice. It's happening in two states. The designated judge in Rivers State applied to the police to open the court and hold the meeting, and that the police carried out. And some youths went to the court, and there was riot there. You also will recall that in Ekiti State, when the court was sitting to consider a case, some thugs went into that place and disrupted the sitting of the court. Of the tribunal. In a democracy that we think the rule of law should be the bastion and the last point for everybody to seek redress, taking violence to the Temple of Justice is not actually upholding the ideals of democracy, and this must be addressed. The encouraging news, however, is that in the case of Ekiti, the police have arrested 6 persons, and we hope this will be used as a test case so that such things will be eliminated. Because if we desecrate the Temple of Justice, where is the last station of call for the ordinary man to seek justice?
Mr. Chairman, we have just less than a minute to go.
But Claire, I'm sure you know that some of the other headlines of the papers are similar to what we had read before. Just on the Sontai matter, I was wondering, perhaps what we are dealing with here is the intervention of sub-editors, who cast the headlines. Because the substance of the story is to the effect that the court has declined jurisdiction. But in declining jurisdiction over the ex parte motion that was filed, he also urged the parties, or directed the parties, to maintain the status quo. Why did the court decline jurisdiction? The court declined jurisdiction because the subject matter it's already won before the Supreme Court. So maintaining the status quo means that do not continue with your medical probe. Let the Supreme Court decide so that the lower court, which was approached for this injunction, does not act in vain. So to say that the suit has suffered a setback or the court is proceeding with it is slightly confusing. It says maintain the status quo. In other words, leave the acting governor as he is and then leave the substantive governor as he is. Yes.
Okay, Kingsley, we'd just quickly like to say we have other papers, Vanguard, The Nation, Blueprint, and Daily Sun, all, of course, are leading with the same story. Some just have slight, leads, like the The Nation has Sambo's role in PDP ticket still shaky. And of course, we have Senate beginning probe of South African arms fiasco and investigation on the incident and the synagogue. And Kingsley, you have the National Mirror?
Yes, I have the National Mirror. I also have New Telegraph, as well as the Union, and just a little accent on the job creation copy that we read earlier. This comes from the National Mirror. Education sector accounts for 50% of created jobs. That's according to the National Bureau of Statistics. The story of the Chibok girls is also right there on the front page of the National Mirror. And of course, on the front page also is a story of the Sovereign Wealth Fund. Supreme Court gives January 26th ultimatum to federal government and the states. And of course, the story that we also took in our major bulletin at 7 o'clock, mutiny. NLC wants death sentence reversed, says execution won't restore discipline in army. And of course, they're dealing with the IDPs, no cholera in Borno refugee camp.
Right,
and I'll quickly make just...
Mr. Chebi, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's all right.
I'm sorry about that. All right, we'll move on now. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria. We'll take a break, and when we come back, we'll be looking at the main subject for discussion this morning.
Shopee has ensured the reconstruction of the Abuja Lokoja Road and the East-West Road in Port Harcourt.
The standard gauge rail tracks from Abuja to Kaduna and Lagos to Kano indicates that our trains are coming back.
The second Niger Bridge in the southeast and the local Oweto Bridge in the north central are in progress, thanks to Shopee.
Shopee's mass transit program has made transportation easier for Nigerians.
Shopee has rehabilitated over 1,000 health centers across Nigeria.
Shopee has provided mama kits to pregnant women, and polio is on the verge of eradication.
Shopee has also ensured the provision of social amenities, and through its various training programs for young people, guarantees a better future.
Shopee, delivering service with integrity.
What is going on?
Haven't you heard? Samsung and Etisalat are having the most amazing free data and smartphone offer ever!
Hello?
Babe, you can now get all Samsung smartphones at the lowest prices at Etisalat Experience Centers or any authorized Samsung dealer.
Yes, I know. First, you get up to 1.5 gigabytes free data once you buy the smartphone, and then double of every data bundle you buy of 200 megabytes and above for the next 12 months.
Experience speed on everything from the Samsung Galaxy S5 to the Samsung Trend Lite at the most affordable prices.
Etisalat, now you're talking.
Nigeria, we the people decree that the power of evil secrecy shall fail.
All Nigerians should understand that a divided Nigeria can only mean catastrophic consequences for the entire black race.
We all African countries count on you, and you are our beacon of hope.
That when Nigeria sneezes, all of us will catch cold.
All of us who look to Nigeria for lessons and inspiration never cease to thank God for this wonderful gift to Africa.
Nigeria enjoys the respect, the admiration, the friendship, and the hope of an entire continent.
The powerhouse of Africa.
Nigeria.
Unite and build Nigeria.
God bless Nigeria.
A message from protectors of Nigerian posterity.
Running on the network service of the NTA from the stable of the NTA Educational Television. This quarter, a wide variety of educational programs. Fun Bus, Tuesdays 5:30 p.m. It is fun-filled and educative for children ages 5 to 11. Walk It Out, Saturdays 9 a.m. Walk It Out is a mathematics quiz program for students of junior secondary schools. Take a Step, Tuesdays 6 p.m. with a repeat broadcast on Sunday at 10 a.m. Take a Step is a general purpose quiz program for students in senior secondary schools. Young Inventors, join the Young Inventors every Mondays at 5:30 p.m. Young Inventors encourages and celebrates creativity, ingenuity, and originality among children and young adults. It's a bouquet of active participation, learning, and being educated in an interesting way.
Thank you for remaining with us. Let's start the conversation now. As we said earlier on, bonds issuance, it's not new to Nigeria. It remains a fallback source in the financing of governance process, mostly in the attainment of targets in projects as well as programs execution. How well has the bond taken over the years, of course, been utilized to provide for the people through the machinery activated in governing the people? Omini Odin in this report poses questions on whether bonds have been channeled for the purposes they are meant.
In the public governance and public finance domains globally and locally, going into debt to finance capital and recurring targets and projects has become a norm which has generated public debate as to its necessity or otherwise. The developing economies, just like the developed ones, are not left out, Nigeria inclusive. Over the years, and most recently, state governments in Nigeria have gone into indebtedness running into billions and trillions of both foreign and local currencies. Arising from this trend, most state governments in Nigeria have left debt prepayment in arrears of about 180, 50 to 30 years as burden to successive regimes. This undoubtedly has affected the running of government at the state levels, including the Federal Capital Territory. Given the scenario, the concern across board is the monies collected in debt over the years, have they been properly utilized for the purpose they are meant? Due to the huge debt profile steering the economy, the challenge of running governments across the tiers still lingers, and the expectation from the people increasing and expanding almost on a daily basis. Governance must go on, one would readily say. So, what is the way out? State governments nationwide have recently resorted to taking bonds swelling up to various figures, which to analysts is rather alarming in the face of stark economic realities. Some of the fears revolve around whether the bonds taken are properly utilized, and if it is appropriate to go into taking bonds and for what purpose. Also, why should bonds be taken and for what reason? Financial experts say bonds are taken to finance government's deficit in a non-inflationary and sustainable manner, and to enhance fiscal discipline and for monetary policies, among other reasons. A cursory look at government bonds in the last 10 years show an increase to 12.31% as of September this year, from 11.89% in August of same year. Within the period under review, it averaged 11.60% from 2007 until this year, reaching an all-time high of 16.46% in February 2012.
Okay, thank you, Dear, for that background. Well, we have joining us in the Abuja studios now, Dr. Emeka Okengu. Dr. Okengu is a financial analyst. I'd like to welcome you to Good Morning Nigeria.
My pleasure.
Okay, let's begin our conversation, as it were, going through the ABC of government borrowing. What various forms of debt are for the government, of which bonds are a special class. Then we'll begin to take bonds, as a special category, which we will now deal with, and the various implications.
Let's just keep it very simple. Borrowing is all about creditworthiness. Okay, and it's also important that we come to the fact that this new borrowing culture actually recommenced in 2003. At the point in time, we had now started, reforming what you call our national treasury bills, where that had created so much debt, profiling for the country, to the extent that we were having over 79% of our debts as external debts. Okay, and that made us credit unworthy. And by the time we were now getting the credit relief, the debt relief of, I think, $18 billion or something, and government now said, okay, let us now reform our bond process. First and foremost, borrowing is not bad. It's important that is made clear. But the application of the funds you've borrowed is actually where you have your challenge. And I think that is what you should be able to focus on here. Are you borrowing to be able to place something that can make you live a better life, provide better facilities for your people? Or are you borrowing to be able to now probably fund this new mantra you have in Nigeria called the dividends of democracy? And to everybody, dividends of democracy is building a road even when you don't need one, engaging in projects even when they are not needed at all. So all forms of borrowing are there. Bonds, yes, it might easily become one of your easiest ways of raising capital, because what a bond means is that I am giving you this, okay, so that you can be able to give me credit, and over a period of time. Usually you have bills which are shorter term. Bond is better because I think it's the longest, okay. So when this happens, but again there are a lot of risks to also taking bonds. You have what you call your credit risk, of course. You have what you call your currency risk. You have what you call even your country risks, in being able to borrow. Instead of going into these technicalities, I think what people will be interested in knowing is, why are we all worried that state governments are raising bonds?
Before that, let's look at the attraction.
Yes.
You just said, apart from the period of tenure, what is exactly the attraction in bond? There are other, like Kingsley said, there are other forms of borrowing. You could go to the banks. So what makes bond issuance attractive?
Very simply, it's against all other forms of borrowing. Usually, the interest you pay on bonds, okay, there are bonds that come with zero coupons. Okay, meaning that apart from what you pay probably to be able to service those bonds, okay, you're going to be paying back what you borrowed over a period of time. That's I think the biggest and the best. Second, and most importantly, is that, okay, there's so many kinds of bonds though. You have what you call amortized bonds and then the bullet bonds. Bullet bonds are better because it allows you to be able to run that full gamut of probably 20, 30 years, However, what should probably bother us as Nigerians, which is what I thought probably you'd be able to ask me, is that, do we really have the structure to be able to run these bonds that we're borrowing? Because you see, when you're borrowing bonds and then you are now tying your payment against what you call ISPOs, then it begins to get more worrisome.
We will get to that.
Yes.
But what we're trying to do is also to get the viewer understand what bond issues are, and also to appreciate the impact of the bonds or the issues that their governments issue, the impact on their lives. So this is why we have to take it gradually. You have to break it down for us, and then we'll begin to look at these other aspects you're talking about.
It's fine. I'm telling you, bonds are fine. Bonds are fine. That cheap, long-term sources of funding, and as long as you have access to long-term funds, it's a good idea. It's a good thing. But what should worry you is not that you have long-term access to funds, is what you apply those funds to, and what you intend for those funds to mean to you. And that's why I said early on, are you taking these funds? Because there's this, I think it's Nigeria that manufactured, that language, dividends of democracy. I don't know where else, people, you're employed to do, what you're doing is what the governor is doing at his level. And you are not coming on air, you and your colleague, to say, oh, now we are working because of dividends of democracy. As against somebody who is a public officer, who is a governor, first and foremost, they tell you the executive governors, and then they begin to showcase what it is I've done in government. And this is supposed to be money you've taken against, the future and now of the people. To that extent, this is where the worry for bonds are. Are bonds good? Yes, they are good. Okay, because they allow you, what you might call easy or cheap financing, long-term financing, to be able to apply to projects. But what are the frameworks of deploying these bonds? I think that is where the wahala is.
Very well, Dr. Okengo, it says the wahala. The phrase dividends of democracy, it's a hangover of extended military rule.
I agree.
So when military rule ended and we had democracy, the Fourth Republic in 1999, governments, local, state, and federal were all enthusiastic to, as it were, perform and let people realize that, yes, versus military rule, this democracy is a lot better. But to return to the issue of bonds, you've given us the background. What is the field like at the moment? Why are states borrowing from what you can see, and why should we be concerned?
We should be concerned. We should be concerned because, first and foremost, those bonds are being tied against ISPOs. And that's very worrisome.
ISPOs stand for irrevocable
standing payment orders. So,
also explain that to us.
So it simply means that you are borrowing money that you own, technically. Because what happens is that the moment you tie any debt to ISPO, it is removed from source. So it is money accruing to the states. Your internally generated funds, your projected cash flows, and monies coming in from all sources, are tied to the bond that you have taken. So meaning that if that bond fails, the person who's giving you the bond walks away with his money. And then you're left holding the wrong end of the stick. And that's what should worry us. But to the extent, again, what also worries me more is the federal government comes out and says, oh, we're worried about the state's appetite for accumulating debt. But what framework and instruments have you put into place to be able to check this?
Aren't there?
I want to.
But the DMO, that's the Debt Management Office.
Yes.
Has its guidelines for both local and foreign borrowing.
Okay.
But it has its guidelines. I'm sorry, Dr. Okengo. Let's go back again. Again, we are saying this for the benefit of our viewers. Yes. That's why we are dealing with the ABC of it. Yes. When you talk about ISPOs, which again means irrevocable standing payment orders, that has to deal with the repayment of the bonds.
Yes.
Yeah, and it means, I would like you to explain this. I know it, but I would like you to explain this for the benefit of our viewers.
That's what I'm saying to you.
So if your monthly allocation from the state government is say 2 billion naira,
yes,
a percentage of that goes for the settlement of the payment of the bonds. Just explain that to our viewers.
That's what I'm saying to you. What monitoring and oversight frameworks do you have from the federal government to be able to hold on to these bonds? I don't want to start mentioning states. There are states whose IGRs are under 2 billion.
Exactly. And bonds.
So that comes back to you then, Claire. And you said that they're oversighting. So if you're oversighting, why would you allow a state whose internally generated funds cannot be able to carry the volume that they're taking, to be getting the bonds? Where are they getting the approvals from? Because you see, the proper thing you're supposed to do is that, if you look at the debt management analysis report, it's not favorable at all. Okay, so what it is I am saying is that if you are taking money, and this comes again to our democratic culture, our culture of development, okay? As Nigerians, as a country, the last I was here, speaking with your colleague, we were talking about economics and economy. Are we operating economics or are we operating an economy? Are we throwing these bonds into something that is productive, into something that have clear returns on investments? Or are we throwing this money into things that have clear returns of dividends of democracy? Okay, where in some states, you're seeing roads being built 2 weeks after these roads are being built with monies that are borrowed and tied against, ISPOs, rains come and wash them away. Okay, even when these roads are staying there, they're leading to nowhere. Okay, you have states that are borrowing, money from the bond market and they're putting into solar street lights. And 2 weeks down the line, you don't see any of them, working. So if you are taking bonds, and you are not conscious of the fact that what it is you're doing is that this money you're taking is not free money. It is already tied to your total earnings, not even your projected earnings. Okay, because every month, if it's amortized, that money, is taken, with or without your permission. So this is a worry, and this is what should worry us, and you shouldn't be blaming the states. Okay, you shouldn't just be focusing on the states, because somebody somewhere had looked at the profile that the states are presenting, and they're saying you can go to the bond market to borrow.
Sorry, Kingsley, I'm afraid it's top of the hour. Dr. Emeka, we'll come back to continue with this discussion. We'd just like to go back to the newsroom where Lydia Sampson is, and when we come back, we'll continue. Pardon me. Lydia, over to you.
Thank you, Claire. Here's an update of the news. World leaders have arrived in New York ahead of the 69th UN General Assembly, which opens today. President Goodluck Jonathan is leading the Nigerian delegation to the summit, which is taking place amid a multiplicity of a global crisis, some of which are transnational or cross-border in nature. The agenda for discussion will include sexual violence in conflict areas, the health of women and children, tackling the Ebola virus, and climate change. President Jonathan is expected to join other world leaders to address the UN Security Council. The Senate has adopted the report of the Committee on Judiciary, Human Rights and Legal Matters on the Corporate Manslaughter Bill 2014. The bill, sponsored by the late Paris Ehimweredu from Delta State, seeks to make corporate bodies and agencies liable for their acts of manslaughter or negligence, dereliction of duty, and gross incompetence, which causes the death of a person. The House of Representatives plenary on Tuesday was thrown into a rowdy session following a walkout staged by members of the All Progressive Congress APC over what they termed an attempt by the ruling party members to sweep over the carpet the alleged smuggling of $9.3 million reportedly meant for the procurement of firearms and ammunition for a Nigerian government security outfit from South Africa. The explanation of the Deputy Speaker, who presided over proceedings this Tuesday, the motion borders on matters of national security and that it be tabled and discussed on the next legislative day, did not go down well with members of the opposition. Information Minister Labaran Maku has called for global action against terrorists operating in the Sahel region. The minister made the call when he received German ambassadors to Nigeria, Michael Zenzi, in Abuja. The minister maintained that since the 9/11 attack on the United States, terrorism has spread to other parts of the world, including Nigeria. To Claire and Kinsley for the rest of Good Morning.
All right, thank you, Lydia. And if you've just joined in on this conversation, you're watching GMN. Good Morning Nigerian, the network service of the NTA. And we are talking about issuance of bonds, of course, not just by state governments. We have Dr. Emeka, I beg your pardon, Okengu with us. Dr. Emeka, just before we went on the break, you were trying to explain a point, but I'd like to ask you, I understand that in the ISAs, that's the Investment Securities Act, there are stipulated requirements, for bond issuance, to provide. And there are also rules and regulations provided for in the SEC, Act. So are these not sufficient grounds? Are these not sufficient, securities?
Everything is sufficient. Laws are made for man. It's also man. There are always ways you can be able to get around things. And let me tell you one way that would have been able to secure all these challenges and fears. The disconnect between the states and the MT, the mid-term expenditure framework of federal government. You see, what it is you have is that you have a governance system that is in some way integrated, but in project implementation segregated and disconnected. You see, if you have a federal government that is running a mid-term expenditure framework, and we are all supposed to be part of this general whole, and you are not now tying probably what the states are getting in or what the states want to do into this holistic picture. The tendency is that it becomes, I'll give you a typical example. In the days of private universities or state universities, the moment I think it was Abia State or Imo State then that started the Nebraska university thing, it became a dividend of democracy. Every governor, every state wanted a university. Okay, and because the law allowed, the states to be able to now get these universities, before you could say, Jack, you had this implosion of universities. everywhere. Now, same thing is happening in the bond market, because people say, okay, I can be able to get 10 years, 20 years, money to be able to spend. Like I said to you, it might not be appropriate to be able to start mentioning, names, because practically all the states are guilty. Even those who have this so-called large, IGRs, because if you tie them truly to what they're borrowing and tie it to what it is they're putting those fundings into, it begins to get more scary. So it's not about pointing fingers or pointing with. It's about letting people know that what's proper for us to do is that for us to understand and appreciate that part of what misplacement or misinvestment of these monies that you're borrowing over a long period of time is that it begins to now create, inflation. It begins to now even make it impossible for you to be able to now deliver on the real dividends of democracy, which is what? Human capital, okay, that is sustainable, and job creation. These are the real dividends of democracy. But when you go to borrow monies and you're throwing these monies into things that cannot be able to generate any income for you, that are not able to help you to develop your human capital, infrastructure that you do not need, okay, or that cannot help you in your overall or holistic development programs, you're just pissing the money down the gutter. So the challenge is, one, the people, like you said, SEC, the act that says you must do X, Y, Z. Based on what are you approving this bond? Somebody says to you, I want to build a dam, and I want to raise 30 billion or 30 what to be able to build this dam. The first question will be, give us the ROI of this dam. How is this dam going to help you to be able to repay the bond you've taken? And then, is there any monitoring apparatus that enforces that you must apply those funds to what it is you said you're going to be doing with them? Now, it comes to a very major gap or lacuna in our governance system. And do you know what it is? Long-term planning. So if you borrow long-term funds and you use them for short-term programs, what do you have?
Well, I think that the key issue that you're dealing with at the moment has to do with the absence of due diligence. And also the lack of oversight by the appropriate authorities. But it appears to me that one of the key points that you have also articulated is the utility of the bonds. Are the bonds intended to deliver mere dividends of democracy, or are the bonds intended to grow the economy? The argument might be made, for instance, I'm just saying for purposes of argument, that yes, if we build rural roads, it will be possible for farm produce to be evacuated. It will be possible for farmers who are in the hinterland to earn more. If we build more schools, then we'll be coming again to the development of human capital. If we build, state governments hardly build dams anyway, that's the federal government responsibility. But just these two examples. But the problem I think you're talking about has to do with the repayment. Can that road repay itself, even through imposition of taxes? What then should state governments do? Because they're already in this, and that's how we got into the debt trap in the 1980s and 1990s.
Thank you, Kingsley. You've raised a very, very beautiful point. Each time I hear farmer, I laugh. And let me tell you why I laugh. There's a difference between gardeners and farmers. Statistics in Nigeria show you that 87% of our farmers are subsistence farmers. And what is subsistence? You're farming what you're eating and the little you're going to, to be able to. So you're not doing any farming. But if you were to build a road, a government now has this 10,000 hectares of rice farm, okay, somewhere in Nasarawa. Imagine that probably we have moved from plantation. The people who brought agriculture to us are no longer doing plantations, they are doing belts. You're talking about the wheat belt running across almost 10 states in the United States. So if you were doing a belt, an agricultural belt, and you now said, okay, fine, let us now build a feeder road to be able to run through this belt, then you're talking farming. And then when you're talking farming, what are the back ends of farming? You start talking irrigation, you start talking seedling, you start talking storage, you start talking processing, you start talking transportation. This is how you can be able to spend the bond. So the first thing would have been, do we have 100,000 hectares of land that can now begin to now, explode an integrated agricultural program that can be able to give us processing mills, transportation programs, seedling programs, and then you begin to now gravitate and then build what you can call your scale of reference. But the moment they say, okay, it will help the farmers, and then by the end of the day, who are these farmers? I'm running a project somewhere, and I decided to take a long drive all across to this processing mill. And by the time it was all the way from Edo somewhere in Anambra State, and this was big processing mill, 120 tons per hour of tomato processing. And I said to my client, do you know what 120 tons of tomato per hour means? You're talking about 12 trailers of tomato every 1 hour. So when somebody now says to you, I have a lot of farmers, and these are the kind of things state governments can do. I have a lot of farmers in my place who are planting tomato. By the time you gather all the tomato they have planted, you don't even have 10 tons in the whole planting season. He has put in state money into going to now develop a 120 ton per hour, not a year, not a day, per hour facility. So you see, the critical mass here is that first and foremost, another angle we should be able to look at is what is the capacity of states? What human capital, what technical capacity do they even have to be able to utilize funds that are raised from the bond market? Because the bond, the moment you're able to bring in the instruments to be able to get a bond, you will get a bond. Because the man who wants to give you the money is secure. That's why it's a bond.
Precisely.
Okay? And the more you want to come and get it, the more we are throwing ourselves into debt. For me, the other side of me will say it's also an instrument of subjugation. Because the people who are giving you this money know that you can't pay. That's the truth.
That's what I asked earlier, Dr. Okengu. Namely, we are getting ourselves, again, at least at the local level, into another debt trap, another debt peonage. How do we begin to resile out of it so that we don't suffer the same consequences that we had with our external debt in the 80s and 90s up to 2006?
Substructure model. Substructure model. So you need to ask yourself, Kingsley, Claire, what are you running? Economics, yes, it's a good deal. Economy, that's what you need. If you're running production and you're putting your bonds into what would make sure that your production is processed and value chained, you're good to go. And then you don't have a governor who says to you, my people. What you now have a governor who says to you, this business. And this is where your private sector, this is where your PPP is coming. Where is the private sector in all this bond business raising? More so when you are saying as government, you don't have business in business. Are you listening to me, my brother? Yes. So the moment you don't have the private sector, okay, coming in to say, okay, fine, we are going to be doing the technical part. You are going to be bringing, probably what you call the environment for us to be able to do business. What is this environment? Make it possible for us to get licenses for land. Make it possible for us to get this. We will now bring in the technical capacity, the skills required, the machinery equipment, and then we are all running. And this is why SBAs now transfer what you call the small business administrations. If you know when America took, its bailout funds, they didn't give it to the big companies all. They also listed the small companies that were now the people that were really employing labor, in America. So when government says to you, we're going to create 3 million jobs, and then somebody wakes up and says, oh, because I want to be part of the 3 million, let me go and take a bond and then build factories. And then you go and build one gigantic factory to be able to now start processing yam because you're from Benue State. And your factory is taking 1,000 metric tons of yam every hour. Okay. And your total production is 1,000 every year.
Okay, Dr. Kengu, what we're having at the moment is rising domestic debt profile for many states in Nigeria. There are implications of this on our economy, aren't there?
Of course. I mean, the answer is in the question according to my lecturer. I mean, you walk into your house and somebody says to you, Madam, we have 1 cup of rice left. And then you turn to your husband and say, darling, what do you think is happening here? Of course, your children are going to go hungry if you don't replace it. So what I'm trying to say to you is that you cannot have rising debt profile and you don't have commensurate returns, okay, on what has made you borrow. Okay, like I said to you, borrowing is good. There's no business person that does not borrow. You must borrow if you're a business person. But what happens?
Last question.
What is critical is what do you do with the debt?
Well, that's as you rightly said. What you do with what you have borrowed is an important question. But again, if the debt profile, debt overhang, continues to be with us, what options are available to state governments?
The options are available to federal governments, not state governments. The state governments will keep borrowing. No. If they make you a governor today, Kingsley, yes, the first thing you're going to do is to go to the bonds market. Let's face it. But what the federal government should do, must do, is to be able to now enforce standards. To be able to say, listen, it's not about saying don't borrow. It's about saying if you borrow, okay, you are borrowing to put all of us into trouble, because by the time they are calculating this debt, they are going to be calculating it against Nigeria. And if that state gets credit unworthy, the people there suffer because of one man's mistakes. So it is important that federal government begins to now strengthen its oversight, and regulatory, and then begin to call to order before it is too late, because a lot of these bonds haven't run out. So I think it's important that in now planning our midterm expenditure strategies, the federal government should expand what they do at the federal level, to also now include the states, so that we can be able to also now have a bullet approach, to managing, at the outcomes of debt, overhangs.
Okay, I would like to thank our guest this morning. Is Dr. Emeka Okongwu, a financial analyst, has been here discussing with us the implications of the rising indebtedness of state governments and what role the federal government should take in this. We'll take a break now. We thank you for being with us. We'll take a break. When we return, we'll continue with the conversation.
There is an Ebola virus epidemic in some West African countries. The Nigerian government wants you to be aware and watch out against the spread of Ebola in your community. Help keep our country safe. Refer anybody coming into Nigeria from any other West African country to a hospital for proper medical screening. And watch out for severe cases of fever, headaches, diarrhea, chest and abdominal pain, sore throat, cough, red eyes, and bleeding from the eyes, ears, and nose. Protect yourself. Wash your hands regularly with soap and sanitizer. Avoid contact with the blood, urine, feces, or saliva of animals like bats, monkeys, gorillas, chimpanzees, or infected persons. The Ebola virus is deadly. Don't catch it. Don't spread it. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information. There is an Ebola virus epidemic in some West African countries. The Nigerian government wants you to be aware and watch out against the spread of Ebola in your community. Help keep our country safe. Refer anybody coming into Nigeria from any other West African country to a hospital for proper medical screening. And watch out for severe cases of fever, headaches, diarrhea, chest and abdominal pain, sore throat, cough, red eyes, and bleeding from the eyes, ears, and nose. Protect yourself. Wash your hands regularly with soap and sanitizer. Avoid contact with the blood, urine, feces, or saliva of animals like bats, monkeys, gorillas, chimpanzees, or infected persons. The Ebola virus is deadly. Don't catch it. Don't spread it. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information.
Vitamilk Energy, loaded with natural multigrains, nutritiously energizes your body and strengthens your muscles. Vitamilk Energy for strong muscle and powerful energy.
What's going on?
Bros, you don't know, take 1 minute, so I just introduced one sharp free data and smartphone offer.
Hello? Oh boy, they will knock you up to 1.5 gigabyte data when you buy the smartphone. Plus double any data when you load way past 200 MB for the next 12 months.
No waste time, oh. With Jikili money, you save it and enjoy sharp browsing with Techno Phantom Z, R7, and other special techno phones them.
Etisalat, now you're talking.
This is Good Morning Nigeria, coming to you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We are discussing the rising level of indebtedness of various states who are issuing bonds. We're having right now our second guest is Honorable Adeyinka Ajayi, is chairman of the House of Representatives Committee on Aid, Loans and Debt Management. Honorable Ajayi, I'd like to welcome you to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much.
Okay, no state government can borrow without the concurrence of the House of Assembly. But what we are seeing, and that's the impetus for our conversation this morning, is a number of states appear to be going overboard. They are in overdrive in borrowing, particularly from the capital market by way of bonds. The debt overhang, of course, is of growing concern to everybody. What do you think is happening at the state level? Is it that your legislator colleagues at the state level are unmindful of the consequences of this rising indebtedness?
Well, I'd like to take it up from your remarks, and you say it appears to be. I believe it really does appear to be. Does not necessarily mean that that is what is happening in fact. Yes, of course, the borrowings from states require the concurrence of the House of Assemblies of those states, and then of course requires further approvals at the federal level. What is important is for us to know that we're a federation, and the bulk of the work that impacts directly on the citizenry happen at the state and local government levels. That is very key to development, and we really must understand that. Having put that in proper perspective, the rising debt profile, states are running to the bond markets. Yes, the bond market is cheap. The funds are available there for long-term development. What legislators can do, and what we are trying to do, is to ensure that there's a connect between what we are borrowing and what the citizenry feel in terms of impact. The government has an obligation to look into the future also. And that's why, as parliamentarians, we're looking at securing the future by legislation, which is what we do in enacting Fiscal Responsibility Acts, which sets the tone, which, as it were, regulates the incidence of borrowing, how and when a state can borrow, a government, state or federal. The Fiscal Responsibility Act tries to put a cap, a ceiling. It tries to tell you conditions and empowers the Minister of Finance to make regulations for those borrowings. Part of it is that you can only borrow for infrastructure development or human capital development. So you cannot borrow to fund recurrent expenditure. Infrastructure development, some can pay back themselves over a long time, some can't even begin to pay back. If you build roads, you can toll some roads, you can't toll all roads, but we do need roads. Investments in energy, some can pay back in short term, others can pay back in long term. Investment in water, there's social services that governments must render. Some of these things you've got to invest in them in the long term, not necessarily based on your earnings right now, but based on your projections of what your citizenry require and the resources that you have. And that is why I say that it does appear that the states are overshooting their bounds in terms of borrowing. But I think we must
position that, besides the fact that these governments are the closest directly to the people, as it were.
Okay. Honorable, you've just talked about the fact that the funds can, of course, fund themselves. But that is, of course, if the funds are put to the appropriate use. But there are provisions, there are requirements in the IS Act, in the SEC Act, that bond issuers or borrowers are required to provide. I think one of them is the irrevocable letter of authority to the Accountant General. There's also the requirement of the provision of a sinking fund. There's also the ISPOs. But these are mainly to enhance, some of the requirements are mainly to enhance the attractiveness of the funds to the investor. What about the security for the people? Is that also taken into consideration? The security, because they bear the brunt if the funds are not appropriately utilized.
That's why there are regulations. That's why I mentioned the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which says that government, federal or state, can only borrow for infrastructure development. You can only also borrow for human capital development. Aside those two, you will not get approval of either the Debt Management Office or the support of the Federal Ministry of Finance to issue a bond. You will not. You cannot. If you can prove that it is infrastructure or human capital development, you've crossed a certain hurdle. Then it comes to the financials. Can the state's resources now and projected in the future sustain that borrowing? Not every borrowing is sustainable. Those are issues that the Debt Management Office would take into consideration before giving its approval. If your finances as a state cannot support the volume of your request, I assure you that the Debt Management Office would not make a recommendation to the Minister of Finance, who then takes the final decision before approaching the Federal Executive Council for approval and then returning to Parliament for the final go-ahead. There are stages and layers to ensure that these funds go to the right issues.
I was just going to mention this. Some of the reports of the Fiscal Responsibility Commission have been rather unsalutary in terms of compliance with the terms of borrowing, which brings us to a very critical issue. Yes, if there are conditions precedent for a borrower to access the bond market, and the potential borrower or the applicant borrower fulfills those conditions, and the borrower now gets the funds. Are we seeing sufficient oversight with the actual utilization of the bonds that have been obtained? Which is why my colleague Claire was asking, how does this impact the people? That's one leg of it. Are we seeing sufficient oversight?
The incidence of oversight is not an end in itself. It's not a destination. It's a process. Oversight starts not at the occurrence of the debt. Oversight is a loop. It's a continuous loop. You oversight the incidence of the debt pre, during, and post. What we try to do as parliamentarians is to ensure that the executive can work and run without unnecessary influence of the parliament or interference. Once the rules have been obeyed, what we as parliamentarians can do is to follow the money. What do I mean by follow the money? The law empowers us to follow through on our appropriations. For example, at the federal level, we cannot as parliamentarians be seen to question the increasing debt profile on the domestic market if, as parliamentarians, we sit and appropriate a deficit budget. Year in, year out, we empower the executive to go and borrow 500 billion to 600 billion. In about 3-4 years ago, it was 700 billion from the domestic market to issue bonds. So as parliamentarians, we cannot therefore oversight the incidence of that deficit. What we do is to ensure that the monies are spent in the direction that it was appropriated. Therefore, if you've borrowed to build a dam, for example, what we can do, or what we should do as parliamentarians, is to ensure that the dam is built. We can influence the direction of the borrowing as parliamentarians. As a representative, I have a constituency. I represent some people. I know what they want. I know what they lack. My job as a parliamentarian is to ensure that the executive understands the needs of my people and requests for appropriation in that direction. As long as that is done, my oversight job is intact.
It's intact. Honorable Ajay, let's draw some parallel with what happened in the late 70s when we had actually the Second Republic. I'm using this parallel also with regard to our external borrowing. Part of the challenge that the Nigerian economy faced was that state governments were obtaining foreign loans. And therefore, transactions at the subnational level have a direct impact on the national economy overall. At the federal level, are you concerned about the rising quantum of local indebtedness in the current circumstance? And what do you think the federal government response should be, notwithstanding the cry about true fiscal federalism?
Well, absolutely. In absolute terms, you're correct that in the past, and that was before the advent of the Debt Management Office, the real motivation behind the establishment of the Debt Management Office was to put a hold on the management of the nation's debt. We had a process before then where states could go a borrowing, local governments could go a borrowing, and nobody was monitoring, nobody was tracking. So payments become due, nobody's monitoring the payments fall behind, you pay penalties, so you find a debt of 1 billion become 50 billion and you've paid 20 out of it. Because nobody was borrowing. There was so much owing to penalties. The Debt Management Office came on board to have a picture, to have a clear hold on how much we are owing, who we are owing, when the payments are due, ensure the payments are due, are paid, are made as and when due, so that one, the incidence of penalties due to non-payment is avoided. Two, we can really understand the nature of our debt situation. We can manage it more efficiently and more effectively. And since then, we've seen that the DMO at the federal level has gone round the states of the federation to establish a debt management office, to establish a culture that ensures that there's a reporting system where a state government can, at the touch of a button, understand its debt situation, its debt profile. The DMO has been able to do that, and that's why today we can easily say this is what Nigeria is owing, and these are the institutions we are owing. This is what we hold the local contractors in terms of local investors. This is what we owe our external contractors. The problem, external investors, the problem we have, which is of concern to Parliament, is the incidence of local debts. Local debts, both in terms of the structured debt, which is what we're talking about, the debt bond, and the local contractor debts, which are debts owed to service providers within the economy, within the Nigerian system. These are uncaptured and they run into trillions of naira and nobody puts a cap or lid on it. Sometimes we call this, I'm not an accountant, but we choose to call this off-budget borrowing. These monies have been appropriated and the contracts are issued and they are either completed or abandoned and the contractors are not paid. And this has built up so much that it has affected the banking sector because these contractors go to borrow money from banks and then they are unable to pay back. Interest is mounting, banks fail, people lose their jobs. It's impacting on the people. And that is the aspect that has been of serious concern to Parliament. And that is where the disconnect that you mentioned is evident. How are the people benefiting? How is it impacting on the citizens? That is where Parliament is trying to draw a link, ensure that our borrowing is directly felt by the people. Because if you have growth, our growth figures are very interesting. We've become the largest economy in Africa. We're on top of the world. How is this impacting on the lives of you and I?
That's a major concern for Parliament. And I'm sure that you're doing, Parliament is also, taking some decisions on that. But Honorable Adeyinka, we want to thank you for coming to, have a conversation with us on this very topic. Thank you. Honorable Adeyinka Ayotunji Ajayi is Chairman House Committee on AIDS, Loans and Debt Management, and also a member of many committees in the House of Representatives. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria. We'll take a break.
Because our pastoral land should be our pastoral. Those who are going to be farmers,
On the TV,
can't you see us in the meeting?
Wallahi, I see plenty people. Wallahi, they show you one times. I don't go show them again. Wallahi,
Musa,
on the TV.
Wonderful.
We have a total of 4,900,000
I look at Wallahi, we must do almost. Everybody must attend our town rally in North Central, Northwest, and Northeastern Zone.
Yowa! I will feel cry go around the town. Wallahi, at once. Yeah, kowa jama'a mai gari yana gayyatar kowa da kowa a fada. Mai gari ya gaishe ku. If you are informed, ko da yaro jariri na goye a baya. Mai gari inviting you a majalisa an jima saboda ana gayyatar ku. Good luck, Jonathan. You are good luck to Nigeria.
Oh yeah, Turn Northern Nigerian rallies ya fara sosai fa. North Central people, not West people, not to people. The town rally they will not domoto now. Saturday, September 13th, Saturday, September 28th, and Saturday, September 27th. Kawaii. President Goodluck Jonathan don't do us better. Wallahi. Make we join other multitudes of Nigerians to thank him well and join for the demand. Turn Northern Nigerian rallies. Now we go begin rally the main rally. Well past other rallies.
This message is brought to you courtesy Transformation Ambassadors of Nigeria. TAN for One Vision, Nigeria.
Whether your need revolves around business or pleasure while in Abuja, the superb new Savannah Suites with innovative and modern luxury facilities in Area 3 is now providing a unique experience of hospitality in the FCT. It's a haven of peace and tranquility in our superior bedrooms and suites. The Chum Chum concept is still the best in town, dishing out mouth-watering recipes freshly prepared. Our bar is also stocked with your delightful usuals. exotic venue for your conferences and other engagements. The Gwarinpa Savannah Suites is comfortable, calm, and distinct. Visit us today or call 0803-502-1519 or 0805-362-9568 for reservations. Savannah Suites, a celebration of luxury and style.
What's going on?
So you haven't heard? Etisalat is giving amazing data value and smartphones at the lowest prices. With up to 1.5 gigabytes free data sign-up bonus and 100% bonus on all data purchases from 200 MB and above for 12 months. Can I show you some phones?
Get the latest devices at amazing prices at any Etisalat Experience Center or authorized dealers and choose from the blazing fast data and amazing tariffs, all on your smart network of choice.
Etisalat, now you're talking.
All right, let's vary our discussion this morning. And more than 140 heads of state and government gathered in New York for the 69th Annual United Nations General Assembly, UNGAS. Now, this year's agenda is crowded with talks and speeches on new crises, including the rights of Islamic State extremists in Syria and Iraq, the ongoing civil strife in Ukraine, and, of course, the deadly Ebola outbreak, as well as old standards such as climate change and nuclear disarmament. Today, each head of state will have 15 minutes to address the General Assembly. Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan will be addressing the gathering, we understand, tonight. A summit on Ebola outbreak in West Africa is also expected to take place on Thursday, that's tomorrow. The World Health Organization puts deaths from the EVD at over 2,000 in 5 West African countries, including Nigeria. President Obama is expected to address the gathering of world leaders in a bid to raise funds and secure more commitments of aid to the affected countries.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Joining us now from our Lagos Network Center to discuss the theme for this year's United Nations General Assembly is Professor Ugaba Oche of the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs in Lagos. Professor Oche, would like to welcome you to Good Morning Nigeria. The issues to be discussed at this year's General Assembly are fairly obvious. To us, Ebola is very important, but apparently the global attention on the Islamic State that straddles part of Syria and Iraq would appear to have secured better attention from the global powers, and that is to say dealing with terrorism. And yet, right with us here in the northeastern part of Nigeria, terror has been a menace to all of us. How can we graft the issue of dealing effectively with Boko Haram and their associates on this agenda?
It's a central agenda. It's an issue that is of major importance to Nigeria and her neighbors. It's an issue that is of international importance as well. Terrorism has been on the scene for quite some time now, since the 90s, with organizations like Al-Qaeda and ISIS and the rest. But the reason I think why the media, the international media, is so focused on the Middle East is because of the interests, the geopolitical significance and importance of the Middle East as an oil-producing zone, and the fact that countries there have had conflicts in recent times. But that doesn't reduce the importance, the significance of what is happening here in Nigeria. So definitely, terrorism in the northeastern part of Nigeria will find a place on the stage at the United Nations General Assembly.
Hi, Professor Oche. I'm just wondering, how can we extract higher levels of commitment to dealing with terror? Because there have been stories, for instance, of the United States blocking arms purchases by Nigeria, and that attempts by Nigeria to purchase arms from Israel have also been stopped, and the intelligence is not being shared effectively real time with the Nigerian government. How can we press this home and then make it really one that will come away with the proper dividends from this assembly?
Fortunately, it's the United Nations we're talking about. So it gives the president, one, the opportunity to talk at large to the world community, to the community of leaders that are present at the UN. And secondly, it gives the president the opportunity to engage in diplomacy, diplomatic meetings on the sides of the General Assembly, and put across to other leaders our needs and things of significance to Nigeria in the regard that you're talking now. I think the platform is okay for us to press these issues.
Okay, let's, Professor Che, I know you're not a soothsayer, but in the light of the EVD, that's the Ebola virus disease, and of course Nigeria has been highly commended for containing it here in our country, and efforts to do that. President Jonathan is expected to be talking on this, and of course, trying to raise support and commitment, to tackle the diseases among the African countries. He will also be talking about insurgency in this part. But tell us, what might you think President Jonathan's, angle will be? What will he be saying when he addresses the gathering tonight?
Well, I think he will try to put across to them the progress that Nigeria has made in these regards, the insurgency as well as Ebola and other issues. And I think he will try to wrest from the international community their commitment, their own involvement in the struggle against these problems. Because for long, terrorism, for one, has been at the forefront of international politics. Ebola, this is not the first time we're facing Ebola, but we've never faced it so significantly. It is a major problem, as the U.S. President said a few days ago. So it shouldn't be that difficult to get them on our side on a more committed basis. But then I believe the President will put this across forcefully at the UN.
What, Professor Oche, what else would you expect the President and the Nigerian delegation to canvass at this assembly?
They will talk about, I expect, issues such as our own transformation agenda as it relates to the MDGs, Millennium Development Goals, the need for reform, I believe the need to assist in the strengthening, the consolidation of democracy in upcoming countries like Nigeria, and agriculture, issues that the OAU may also be interested in, OAU as well as ECOWAS, regional country as well as regional issues.
Professor Oche, you have already identified the geopolitical interest or the diminished geopolitical interest of the major powers in the Northeast as probably one of the causative factors for their lukewarm attitude. But how can we ratchet up their interest? Because the terrorism in the Northeast, aspects of which have actually seeped into the Federal Capital Territory before they were beaten back. How can we ratchet up their interest? Because Nigeria is strategic to the interest of the world.
Nigeria is, but I think the onus is on us, Nigerians, to put up a strong battle against these forces, against the forces of insurgency. Yes, the Western interest, international interest is important in the support that they can lend to us, but ultimately it behoves on us to fight insurgency. And I think that's how we should look at it.
The issue of climate change will also be one of the issues. In fact, it is another major issue to be discussed, at UNGAS. For us here, we've been having our own fair share of impact of climatic changes. So how important, of course, will the discussion on climate change be for Nigeria?
It will be very, very important. It's an important issue for the whole globe because of the effects of climate change. I think we will put across the impact that climate change is having on this country, especially the coastal areas and the northern desert fringes, and the efforts we are doing to combat climate change, and the need for the international community to support ongoing efforts at the global as well as regional efforts to fight climate change. It's very important for the globe to know that we are also putting in an effort. There are constraints such as finance, technology, scientific knowledge, and it's good for the president to put across to the international community clearly the need for global support for our efforts.
All right, Professor Gaba Oche, thank you for joining us from our Lagos Network Center. Professor Oche is of the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, Lagos. Thank you. Thank you.
On to more foreign stories now. A Syrian aircraft has been shot down by the Israeli military after claiming it violated its airspace over the Golan Heights. Here is Patricia Esame Luba with the details and all that color.
Hello to you. On the foreign scene today, the Iraqi people have hailed airstrikes launched by the United States and its partners against Islamic State targets in Syria, but said that such act should not be a prelude to interfere in Syria's international affairs.
A U.S. official speaking on condition of anonymity said that Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Jordan and Bahrain were all involved, although their exact roles in the military action were unclear.
The Israeli military has shot down a Syrian aircraft that it said it had infiltrated its airspace over the Golan Heights. The incident was the most serious incident to take place on the strategic plateau since the outbreak of the Syrian civil war in 2011.
Reports say it was a MiG-21 fighter jet, which was shot down by a surface-to-air Patriot missile, with the wreckage landing on the Syrian-controlled side of the plateau. There was no official confirmation over the type of the aircraft.
Finally, a Chinese court has sentenced Ilham Tohti, the country's most prominent advocate for the rights of Muslim Uyghur people. This is the latest sign of Beijing's determination to suppress dissent.
Economics professor Ilham Tohti stood trial on separatism charges in the western region of Xinjiang last week. His case has provoked an international outcry in the West and among international human rights groups. Tohti, who is ethnic Uyghur, is the latest moderate intellectual to be convicted by Chinese President Xi Jinping's administration. The harsh jail term sparked dismay among rights advocates who have come under increasing pressure by Xi's government.
That is it on the foreign scene. The program continues, but from me, do have a fruitful day.
All right, thank you, Patricia Esame Luba, for the foreign stories. Time now for sports, and Musbah Dan Wahab will be our guide.
All right, welcome. Let's quickly give you sport now. With 3 defeats in their opening 5 league matches, Liverpool is going back to the drawing board to turn the tide of losses. The Liverpool manager Brendan Rodgers said his side needs to do better after they lost 3-1 at West Ham United on Saturday. Following a narrow 2-1 win over Bulgarian champions Ludogorets Razgrad in midweek, needing a last-gap Steven Gerrard penalty to get their first Champions League campaign since 2009-2010 off to a winning start, Liverpool were 2-0 down after just 7 minutes of their Premier League encounter with West Ham. Raheem Sterling, Liverpool best player player replied with a fiercely struck shot midway through the first half after good work by new signing Mario Balotelli. But West Ham substitute Morgan's late efforts clinched a well-deserved victory for the East London team. With last season's Premier League top scorer Luis Suarez sold to Barcelona and Danny Sturridge injured, Balotelli showed occasional flashes up front for Liverpool, but the evidence suggests that despite a raft of new signings, they may struggle to match last season's second-place finish after 3 defeats in their opening 5 league matches. Roger said that it was going to take time for all the new players to get with the team.
So that's something that we have to improve on, and we must be better at dealing with. But as I said, this group is a group to improve. It's a very young group as well. We don't have, too many really experienced players that have been coping at this level, at this club for so many years. So that adjustment takes a little bit of time, but certainly as we make those adjustments, there's certainly other things that we can improve on.
From football to tennis now, the King of Clay, Rafa Nadal, will no longer participate in the inaugural International Premier Tennis League IPTL lineup. It will be replaced by Swiss maestro Roger Federer, as the organizers announced in India. Federer will be aiming to help Switzerland win the Davis Cup against France in Lille on November 21 to 23, will then be heading off to Manila, Philippines for the first of the 4 rounds of the league, which begins on November 28. Nadal, who had originally been signed up for the Indian Aces, has not played since losing to Nick Kyrgios at Wimbledon because of injury, so organizers have been delighted that they have found such a high-profile replacement as Federer. Federer will be spearheading the Indian Aces, the league's Indian franchise, with Paige Sampras, Gail Monfils, Anna Ivanovic, Sania Mirza, Rabopanan and Fabrice Santoro as his teammates. The other franchises are in the Philippines, Singapore and the United Arab Emirates, who will each host a round of the competition, which runs until December 13. Men's world number 1 Novak Djokovic, his women's counterpart Serena Williams, Andy Murray, Jo-Wilfried Tsonga, Maria Sharapova, Anna Ivanovic, Caroline Wozniacki, as well as former greats Andrea Agassi, Goran Ivanisevic and Patrick Rafter have also confirmed their participation with $1 million prize money on offer. The teams will compete in men's and women's singles, men's and mixed doubles, and men's legend singles with 1 set per match and no advantage scoring. Delhi will host the 3rd round December 6 to 8. About sport this morning, the program continues shortly.
Thank you, Musbab Nawahab, for the sports package. Now, don't forget, just before we end today's program, President Goodluck Jonathan will be addressing a gathering of world leaders at Angas tonight, and it is expected that President will be talking more on EVD, Nigeria's efforts to contain it, climate change, and of course will solicit international support to attack or deal with insurgency, terrorism in this part of the world. But at this moment, I'd like to thank you for being with us since 7 o'clock. We do expect to see you again same time tomorrow. I am Claire Adelabu Abdul Razak Kingsley.
Well, thank you very much, Claire. It's also been my pleasure being with you this morning on the Good Morning Nigeria, which came to you live on the network service of the NTA. Do have a lovely day. We'll see you tomorrow same time at 7 o'clock in the morning.